Travis Wingoodsell. In the Book of Mormon, people of Mosiah are forced to leave the land of Nephi and come across the people of Zarahemla. They were those who left with Mulek from Jerusalem. As Lehi, as we know from the stories, left pre-Babylonian conquering, as the Mulekites were the ones who escaped during the actual conquering battle. And because Lehi and his family were prepared, they had collected seeds, they had wives for their sons, and they had the scriptures, brass plates as it were called, which just happens to coincidentally be the fulfillment of Ezekiel 37, not the Book of Mormon, because the prophecy is that the Book of Joseph is also supposed to contain what is missing in the Bible, the plain and precious parts that were taken out, and also contain the 5 books of Moses. The Book of Mormon does not contain the 5 books of Moses, nor does it fill in any of the gaps. A few, but the only one that really corrects is that Adam fell, not Eve. Did you not know that? I recommend you check section 29, verse 36 and 40. If you're not able to handle the information, stay away. Don't study the scriptures if it's going to cause a crisis of faith. So, the Mulekites, living in Zarahemla, lost the knowledge of their God, altered Hebrew, and so the language was different, so that they could not understand one another. So Mosiah comes in, takes over, conquers them, and teaches them from the brass plates, and teaches them Hebrew and Egyptian again, as we find out that Mosiah, son of King Benjamin, son of Mosiah, taught his sons, the sons of Mosiah, from the brass plates, which were in Egyptian. And so, when you also see Ammon, one of the sons of Mosiah, going to the Lamanites also have changed the religion. They now believe that God is a great spirit. And so Ammon pulled the missionary tactic of building on common beliefs to then lift them to the correct information. And so as the king believed that Ammon was the Great Spirit, he had to say, well, yes, he is the Great Spirit, but there's more to it, and I'm not him. Even though Ammon is very close to Ammon, who is the main god of the Egyptians. And so, being born outside of Utah, being born and raised Mormon, I didn't have a culture in my neighborhood of Mormons to tell me that drinking Mountain Dew is a sin, and chocolate is evil, and pregnant women are a pernicious evil. Benson, quoting Kimball from Miracle of Forgiveness, quoting Packer from a conference talk. Dear God. And so instead, I had born-again Christians. Their church was right there at the corner of Corona High School, right across the street from the original church that I had gone to before the wards were split, and my west side house was moved over to Norco High. That was not done until I think it was while I was at Riggs. So when I came back to Christmas break, no, I stayed. Yeah, I didn't come back the first year until did I? No, I didn't want to go home, so I would have stayed. So yeah, it wasn't until my mission when I had to come back to give my farewell and go through the Temple of Angels and become a Christ in the initiatories, the mysteries of God. And so for me, if I was going to learn about Mormonism beyond early morning seminary, beyond church, beyond sleeping during the conferences at the Stake Center, because we had to watch it on satellite. So, and I still remember going to the primary during Wednesdays during my earlier years, sitting in the back row, complaining about or adding lyrics to the songs. And Mormons, I noticed as I moved to Utah, consider me impure as a Mormon, that I have been too influenced by the world to be a good enough Mormon, despite my experience and being Mormon causing me to pursue an education in ancient languages and cultures, Middle Eastern specifically, Egyptian, Israel, Canaan. And as a result, the fruit of my education was deciphering Paleo-Hebrew, which then led me to deciphering Egyptian petroglyphs, which then had me discover that the Bible was written from translations of the Egyptian petroglyphs. And so I, being an impure Mormon, not of the master race, is the one who figured out that Joseph Smith is a translator of Hebrew and Egyptian. And so Mormons do not understand me. Mormons here in Utah. Their cultural traditions have been altered over time to separate from Mormons in the rest of the world. Despite the church having a curriculum for seminary, for Sunday school, for priesthood and relief society that harmonizes around the world. We all get taught the same repetitious lessons over and over again, and yet Utah Mormons understand Mormonism different than those of us from outside. The last 10 or so years, 10, 20 years, there have been an exodus from Utah as Utah Mormons, born and raised in the traditions different from the outside Mormons, are now moving and spreading Utah Mormonism to Southern California, where I was, and other places around the world. And that is being clearly manifested. As I'm hearing from Mormons in those other places who are of the rising generation, who speak and think like the Utah Mormons. And so the indoctrination of Mormonism is spreading around the world now. And of course Utah Mormons say, yeah, well sure, because we're right. Right? And I'm the one who's wrong. But it's a lack of understanding of each other because of the separation of how we were born and raised. The context of Scripture changes. And so for me, I grew up in the world where science dominates. English grammar is science. Linguistics is a science. And so for me, when I read the Scripture, I use it through the science of linguistics for my grammatical interpretation, utilizing the knowledge of the definitions of the 1830s, rather than the altering definitions where happiness is no longer considered happy. It's changed in meaning. Among other words that have changed in meaning, such as juicy. I still am confused on that one. Why is it printed on a woman's backside? I don't want to think of juicy there. I don't understand. So anyway, the concept of Zion is also different. Those of us outside of Mormon Utah read the Scriptures, section 45 verse 66 for example, and it shall be called New Jerusalem, a land of peace, a city of refuge, a place of safety for the saints of the Most High God. We have been born and raised outside of Utah to understand that we're going back to Missouri. Utah Mormons? Nope. Salt Lake City with Temple Square is now Zion. Nelson even confirmed that this year before conference. He came out with some news coverage that was not made into a video, so you had to actually check the church's website and see those first presidency statements. And others that he's been talking about with the gathering. He's talking about Zion here in Salt Lake City, Utah, Temple Square, as the place of gathering, not Missouri. And so we're not speaking the same language despite all of us being Mormon. So who's right, who's wrong? Well, obviously the president of the church is the one true prophet of God who speaks for Jesus, and therefore he would be correct. And as Benson did those 14 fundamentals of a prophet, saying that, well, the dead prophets are no longer legitimate, we only trust the living prophet, and he can change Mormonism into a completely new religion if he wants to. That the words of Jesus are no longer valid because we have a living prophet. Screw Jesus. Go back and read it. The 14 fundamentals of a prophet. He didn't give it as the president of the church. This is what he's talking about when a dead prophet isn't as valuable as the living prophet. Because if the living prophet decides, hey, screw Jesus, well, he's the living prophet. Jesus speaks through him. It doesn't make sense. It's not comprehensible. Benson was confusing. He's not logically making any sense. You know, he dismisses the Book of Mormon. And yet Benson was all about the Book of Mormon. What the hell? The Book of Mormon is either the keystone or the living prophet is the keystone. Which is it, Benson? You're causing confusion. And that confusion is still in Mormons to this day, as an excuse to dismiss those of us with the differing views of Mormonism. And so, is Utah this place of peace, of refuge, and of safety for the saints? We will know by the fruits whether Nelson is telling us the truth or if he's a liar, pants on fire. So, did he protect us from coronavirus? Section 45, verse 31 warned us that it was coming for the latter days. Did Nelson protect us? He helped spread and escalate it. Church was a super spreader. And the church profited off of our misery and suffering. $6 billion through our tithing. By their fruits we shall know them. He murdered to get gain. Well, we know that's Lucifer's plan. So we now know Nelson. But there's more. Violent crime has gone up in Utah. The news has been covering that. It's not just the rest of the nation that violent crime is escalated. White supremacy under Trump has skyrocketed the white supremacists. It's almost as if Trump, by his entrance into the presidency, called for the uprising to take over America with white supremacy. And yes, Utah also is a violent place now. Is that peace, safety, refuge? No. We have drought and storms. Remember the windstorm the day before Nelson's birthday? Did Nelson have the church go out and donate to the rescue effort, to donate food during that time? Nope. He sent out a little thing saying, thanks for all the birthday wishes. Church did not get involved. They remained silent. When the rest of the world has some problems, they send out a token amount of supplies. Couple of truckloads. I remember last year they had an example of one truck being unloaded. They had it all there on the floor with the open back of the truck. Oh wow, look at all that. For how many thousands of people? When coronavirus first began, remember the grocery stores got pillaged and plundered? We couldn't find toilet paper? Yeah. Grocery stores in and of themselves cannot handle an emergency. They don't have enough supplies. The supplies they have are conditioned upon spreading out the customers so that they can order weekly. And yeah, the emergency situation told us immediately that grocery stores don't have sufficient. So the church, in an emergency, only sending a truckload, oh good, the leaders get a bottle of water. Well done. And so Utah is not Zion. Salt Lake City is not Zion. Well, what has Nelson been telling us then? Well, he's been telling us that in order to have peace, we have to have peace in the Lord. Despite all of the natural disasters and calamities and wars and violence, it's up to us. We need to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and just be at peace. When the grocery stores don't have food for us, don't have toilet paper, we just need to have peace in Jesus. When violent crime is on the rise, threatening your life and your family's life, you just need peace in Jesus. When the storms cause destruction, you just need peace in Jesus. And if you die, you die, but at least you're at peace with Jesus. This is a bullying tactic that victimizes the victim. You know, why are you hitting yourself? Just be at peace. Get over it. Remember that, Mick Mulvaney? Get over it. We know them by their fruits. And so we, on the outside of Utah, are more correct than Mormon Utahns, who have been born and raised in the tradition that Utah is Zion. But if we were to go to the source of this scripture, it was given by Joseph Smith, and it can only be found in the Joseph Smith papers. It's for 19 July 1840. So if you do a Google search, Joseph Smith papers, 19 July 1840, it should pop up a link for you to get right to it. I believe it's the B prophecy. That's how I had labeled it. But I'll read it to you so that you can find the right one, whether it's B or not. Let's see. Referring to his parable in section 101, starting in verse 43, he says, North and South America, let's see, the land of Zion consists of all North and South America, but that any place where the saints gather is Zion, which every righteous man will build up for a place of safety for his children, that the olive trees are 12 stakes which are yet to be built, not the temple in Jackson, as some suppose. It's not Missouri. For while the 12 stakes are being built, we will be at peace, but the nations of the earth will be at war. Let's see, the redemption of Zion is the redemption of all North and South America, and those 12 stakes must be built up before the redemption of Zion can take place. That those who refuse to gather and build when they are commanded to do so cease to be saviors of men and are thenceforth good for nothing, but shall be cast out and trodden under the feet of men. And I've done the video where cast out means die by wicked men, because you didn't gather to a place of safety, refuge, and peace, therefore you're gonna die. The whole point of my videos is to save you. Nelson is murdering you. Okay. And then we shall build the Zion of the Lord in peace until the servants of that Lord shall begin to lay the foundation of a great and high watchtower. This is referring to section 101 in the parable. Then the enemy shall come as a thief in the night and scatter the servants abroad. When the seed of those 12 olive trees are scattered abroad, they will wake up the nations of the earth. And when the constitution is upon the brink of ruin, not hanging by a thread, brink of ruin, this people will be the staff upon which the nation shall lean, and they shall bear away the constitution from the very verge of destruction. Oops. Constitution's destroyed, in case you didn't know. Because we're in the latter days, we were supposed to do all this before 2017. That's the date John the Revelator gave us in Revelation chapter 12. That's the beginning of the latter days. The end is 2024, in case you didn't pay attention to my videos. And do I need to go over more? Yeah, it talks about the wisdom of God that we should enter into a compact a city as possible, for Zion and Jerusalem must both be built up before the coming of Christ. Notice no Jesus. How long will it take? 10 years or more? Then 40 years will pass before this work will be accomplished. And when these cities are built, then shall the coming of the Son of Man be. That's the Christ. The Son of Man, not an immortal Trinity in Jesus, who was made historical by Constantine. Because Joseph in section 103 verse 16 says he's Mormon. And so, yeah, this is the cities of Zion and New Jerusalem are not in Missouri. I read it to you. This is Joseph Smith. Just because it wasn't made scripture by Brigham Young does not disqualify it. This is the words of Joseph Smith, a founding prophet. Unless you want to use Benson to deny this as scripture. While Joseph Smith is dead, we don't listen to him. We listen to the living prophet who tells us that Salt Lake City, Utah is now Zion, the place of unrest, no refuge, and insecurity. You remember Transformers? Do you remember the police car that was a Decepticon? What was the words? To serve and protect, or to punish and enslave? It's one of those subtle things that you have to actually pay attention to as the car's driving by in the car chase scene. So that talk must be understood when applying scripture. I did not have access to it until most recently when the church made the Joseph Smith papers available online. I don't have the money to pay for the books. I made the sacrifice to pay for that one right there, the one about Joseph Smith translations. But to pay for all of them, dear God. I mean, one book costs more than the whole church history originally did. What the hell, guys? So, you know, nobody wants to be scammed. nobody wants to be suckered out of their money. Nobody wants to be the fool. But it's blatantly obvious that Nelson is the false prophet. And it's so frustrating that Mormons don't see it, as they're getting fleeced by this con man. You know, it's sad. It's sad to see YouTube with their analog programs silencing me. You can see Travis Wayne Goodsell, 38,000 for my #1 video on going back to New Jerusalem. That was before I saw the Joseph Smith papers. You see, 38,000 know about going back to Missouri. Whether they like the video or not, and there were a lot who didn't like it, they know of it. And where is it? Zion has fled. Which comes from the book of Moses that was rewritten from the Bible, talking about Enoch's Zion. But all is not well in Zion, guys. Even the scripture tells us so. Anybody who says otherwise is trying to fool you. The Princess Bride, dread pirate Wesley, talking to his girlfriend, who doesn't realize it's him yet. She hasn't pushed him off the cliff. Oh, my sweet Wesley, what have I done? Classics. But, you know, there's immoral talk in that show. Be ashamed to ruin a perfect pair. And so therefore it's evil, right, Mormons? Can't watch it? That which we do not understand, we fear. And when we fear, we justify attacking, destroying, and condemning. Seek first to understand before being understood.